Hello and welcome back to the last part of lesson 9.6. Today we're still going to be looking at how to factor trinomials, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to start out with showing you a method where we have just ax squared plus bx plus c, but this really works well for the ax squared plus bx plus c. In other words, you can use the method I'm about to show you when you don't have a coefficient in front of the x squared term, but this works really good when you do have a coefficient, especially if your coefficient of a and the value of c have multiple factors. So I'm going to start out with an easy one that doesn't have a coefficient, and then I'll do a couple examples that has a coefficient, because I think sometimes grouping is what we're going to call this method is a little bit easier for some people when they've been struggling with the other method. So if you don't like this method, that's fine. I don't care which method you use, but I just thought I would show you another technique that you could use if you are having issues. So again, this method is called grouping. So we're going to start out by looking how to factor x squared minus 2x minus 15. Now remember, if we look at this, this is really like saying ax squared plus bx plus c. So in this case, our a value is going to be 1 because I really have 1x squared. Our b value is really going to be a negative 2. And our c value is really a negative 15. So when you group, you always want to start out by taking the product of a times c. So in this case, I have a positive 1 times a negative 15, which is going to give us a negative 15. So what I have to do now is I'm going to look at factors of a negative 15 and see if I can get a sum of negative 2. So factors, and I'm just going to kind of box this off here. So factors of 15 could be a positive 1 and a negative 15. Well, if I add those together, this is going to give me a negative 14. I could switch that around to a negative 1 and a positive 15. But again, when I add those, I just get a positive 14. So neither sets of those factors are going to work. Then what I could do is I could say, well, I have a positive 3 and a negative 5. When I add these two together, this is going to give me a negative 2. Well, if you notice, I want to have a negative 2. So what that does is that tells me now that I can create a couple groups. So with my groups, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with the very first term that I was given. So in this case, it's x squared. And then I'm going to use my two numbers that I just found are my two factors. So this is a positive 3x and a minus 5x. Because remember, the sum of these right here are going to give us this negative 2 up top. And then I'm going to end with my negative 15. So again, my first term and my last term come right from my original problem here. And then whatever factors I found of the product of my a times my c value, or in this case I got 3 times the negative 5 gives me my 15, which is what I got up here. Whatever ones will add to give me that middle term or that b value, I'm going to use those in the middle of my polynomial. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create what we call two groups. So I'm going to group the first two terms together, and I'm going to group the last two terms together. Now by grouping making my two groups, what I can do is I'm going to try to see if I can get two groups that would be the same. So when I look at my first group here, okay, I have an x squared and a 3x. I can factor an x out of both of those groups, and that leaves me with an x plus a 3. Then when I look at my next group, I see that I'm going to be taking a negative out, and I can take out of 5x and 15, I can take a negative 5 out of both of those. So when I do that, that leaves me with x. Now I really have negative 5 times x will give me this negative 5x. Well, negative 5 times what will give me negative 15? That's actually going to be a positive 3. So The thing I want you to notice right now is when I look at my two new groups that I just formed, I have an x plus 3 here and an x plus 3 here. This is the key right here. If you do not get the same binomial inside of the parentheses, you have not done something correctly. Okay, and sometimes the red flag is actually coming from this negative. So if you forget on this negative here to change the sign in the middle like what we did, then you would have an x plus 3 here and an x minus 3. Because they're very close but they're off by that sign, usually I would come back and double check and say, oh, did I forget to take that negative out? Okay, so now what we can do with our group is whatever group is the same, this is going to be the common factor. So I'm going to take my x plus 3 and pull that out up front, and then whatever is left, so I have a x and a minus 5 is going to be left, and that goes in the next set of factors. So this right here is actually going to be the correct factors to my original problem of x squared minus 2x minus 15. And you can double check that if you want to. If you distribute this, we have x squared minus 5x plus 3x minus 15. And when you simplify, x squared minus 2x minus 15. Okay, now again, I'm going to show you on a couple harder examples on the next two examples where this is actually more beneficial. Okay, because I think with when you have an a value of 1, those are a little bit easier to factor without grouping, but sometimes they can get kind of complex if you have values of a that have multiple factors and values of c that have multiple factors. So for example 7, it says we're going to factor 4x squared plus 4x minus 15. So my a is going to be a positive 4, my b is also a positive 4, and our c is a negative 15. So remember, we're going to start out with a product of a times c, and in this case I have 4 times a negative 15, which is a negative 60. So now I'm looking at factors of a negative 60 that will add up to a positive 4. So you can do something like 5 and negative 12, but if I add these, I get a negative 7. We can try negative 5 and a positive 12. I can add those and I get a positive 7, so that doesn't gain me anything. For factors of 60, I could try a positive 6 and a negative 10. Well, this right here, if I add them together, this will give me a negative 4. So at this point, because I see that I have the number that I want, it just has a different sign, that tells me I'm really close. So now if I try the negative 6, and I add that to a positive 10, I can see that I actually get my positive 4, which is exactly what I want. So this right here is what I'm going to put in the middle term of my group. So if you recall, I start out with what I was given, so my 4x squared. Then I have minus 6x plus 10x, and then minus 15. Now we're actually going to group our front two terms and our back two terms together. So when I do that, I'm going to group the first two and the last two together. And I look for common factors inside of each group. So between 4x squared and 6x, I see that I can take out a 2x, and that's going to leave me with 2x minus 3. And between 10x and a negative 15, because this is positive, I don't have to worry about changing signs, but I can factor out a 5 from both terms, and that's going to give me, so I have my plus in here too, sorry, I have 5 times 2x minus 3. Again, double check that everything inside the parentheses is the same, because if it's not, grouping will not work. So I have a 2x minus 3 and a 2x minus 3. That tells me that I'm on the right track. So now I always bring the parentheses stuff up front. So I have 2x minus 3, and then I'm going to multiply that by whatever's left, which is my 2x, and then I have this plus 5 right there. And now I've got the two factors that make up the trinomial 4x squared plus 4x minus 15. And for our last example using the grouping method, I have 6x squared plus 17x plus 5. So my A is going to be 6, my B is 17, and my C is 5. So I'm going to start off with that product of A times C. So I end up with 6 times 5, which gives me 30. So I'm going to break 30 up into its factors, and I want to find factors that will add up to give me 17. So if I start out with factors of 2 and 15, and I try to add these, and actually we got lucky on the first try, I got 17 right away. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start out with what I was given with my 6x squared. I'm going to put in these two terms in the middle, so that gives me 2x plus 15x, and then I still have my plus 5 there on the end, or my C value. I'm going to go ahead and group my first two terms and my last two terms, and then I'm going to look for common factors. So with 6x squared and 2x, I can take a 2x out, and I'll be left with 3x plus 1. Then I have plus, and then when I have 15x and 5, I can take a 5 out of both, and that gives me 3x plus 1. I will double check that I have 3x plus 1 in this binomial and 3x plus 1 in this one, which I do. That makes me very happy. So I'm going to pull that binomial out up front, and then I'm going to fill in the second binomial with everything that is left. So 2x plus 5, and here I have my two factors. Again, you can always double check your work by foiling this out. And if we do that real quick, I see that I have 6x squared. This is going to give me 15x plus 2x, and then of course I get the 5 on the end. So 6x squared plus 17x plus 5. It's exactly what I started out with, so that means I did everything perfectly. So hopefully, if you have been struggling with the factoring, especially with having coefficients on the A and the C values having multiple factors, hopefully this makes a little bit of sense and works a little bit better for you. Again, I am totally okay with whatever method you prefer to use. I just ask that you please show your work. So on that note, I hope you guys have a great day, and we will talk to you later. Thanks.